it can get really complicated, and builders usually, will charge and will come up with a random explanation as to why they've charged that much, I guess. So you will find that most builders, even on an H1 or an H2 slab with a few piers, you might get hit with that.
Hello and welcome back to a brand new episode of Nailed It. This week we are covering everything to do with site costs. So all your site costs, every questions that we commonly get from people, we're going to try and cover those today so that way we can clear it all up and be as transparent as possible. So first one we're going to talk about today, for people who don't know who we are, who exactly is these people that you deem worthy to explain site costs. So you want to kick us off?
Yeah, I guess my name is Chris. I'm the director of Homes by CMA, home builder that we've nearly built 1,000 homes. So
that's crazy.
I'd like to think we know what we're talking about, and particularly when it comes to site costs.
For sure.
So there's a lot of things in regards to site costs that are misunderstood, and the whole purpose of today's podcast is to explain to people what site costs are, what are the tricks, what they should know, what they shouldn't know, and I guess all those things.
For sure.
Yeah.
All right. So there is one thing where builders tend to make a lot of extremely high profits, and that is the site cost. So just tell us a little bit about what is a site cost and what's sort of involved in that.
Well, the first thing is, and for those that haven't watched the episodes before, go ahead and watch it. But if you haven't, a lot of the project builders, what they do is that they start with a low price. So it looks very attractive. You pay a deposit. And then as soon as you get a soil test, you get to know your site cost. And that's where they overcharge you for things. So that's the first thing. So those people that haven't watched the previous episodes, that's how it usually works. And the reason they do it is because most people have no clue what site costs are.
That's it.
Site costs are composed of a few things. And I guess at the top of my head, it's soil test would be the main one. We also have wind rating. And then we obviously have, I guess, everything that is related to the soil test and the survey. So the slopes on your land, if retaining walls are required, and all those things.
All right. So for people who don't know, I'm currently obviously building with CMA, and we're going through the process as you would normally. And we're getting to the point where we had all of our site costs coming up. So like our soil tests and everything. And there's all these weird numbers, there's all these weird letters and that. Do you just want to tell people a little bit more about what exactly they are?
Yeah, and it's quite funny you said that because I do remember your soil test actually, and we had a little bit of an issue with the concrete piering.
We did, yes.
Yeah, but anyway, we'll get back to that at some point. What happens is you pay a deposit, the builder will book a soil test, and usually that soil test is going to show two things. It's going to show the soil classification and the wind rating. Without those two things, a builder cannot really give you a fixed price contract because they don't know how good or how bad the soil is.
That's it. So as a result of whatever those classes come back, what happens?
Yeah, so the results that come in the soil test will then impact the price of your house, and it can actually impact it quite a lot. And particularly if we talk about project builders and how much they might charge for really bad soil or good soil, I guess. So
for sure.
The engineer breaks down the soil test into classes. So it usually starts at S class, then there's M class, H1, H2, E, and P soil. So those are the possible options that the engineer will classify when they do a soil test. So that's the soils. And in terms of wind, it goes N2, N3, N4. After that, you really will not most likely find it in most areas. Most of the areas in Southeast Queensland are probably going to be N2. Some of them are going to be N3. And I don't think we need to explain too much about the wind, but usually how the wind works is the engineer goes on site, they do an assessment as to where the block is. If you can imagine that, for example, your block is on a hill, there's no houses around, so obviously there's nothing to block the wind from hitting your house. So the house has to be made stronger.
That's it.
So that it resists those winds. But then again, imagine that your house is built in a little bit of a valley. There's houses around, so obviously the wind is not going to be as bad. So wind rating does affect the price of a house, but not that much. Again, I'm just talking from experience and from what I've seen from other builders, you might be talking a few thousand, so it's nowhere near as bad as soil test. So going back onto the soil test, it starts with an S-class, and how the soil is classified is based on the movement of the ground.
Yes.
So that's the thing that people have to understand. You might see your block of land and it's looking nice and flat. Land will move. That's the first thing that people don't really realize. Land will move, and the soil classification depends on how much ground movement is on your block, and obviously how the soil is, what sort of
is it rock? Is it?
That's exactly right. So there's a lot to know about, and I guess we might start maybe from the beginning again, going back to the S-class. So I might run through the S-class and the classifications, and then go back onto the soil a little bit, because it can get. That's why people don't understand, because it can get quite involved.
Yeah, for sure.
So S-class soil usually is pretty much when you have, I guess, usually rock or very hard ground that does not get affected by moisture that much. So if you can imagine, this is rock, you put a slab on top, whether it rains, whether it's sunny, it's literally not going to move. So, but on the other hand, as much as an S-class soil is really good, you could also get rock.
Yeah.
And that could be a problem, because obviously for a builder to build a house, we have to do drainage, and we might have to do piering, you might have to do fencing, we might have to do retaining walls. Obviously, we might have to drill into that rock. And so as much as, yes, it could be an S-class, there could be extra costs depending on how hard that rock is, I guess.
Yep.
So S-class, we don't see that often, to be honest. I would say maybe 10% of the soil tests I see would probably be S-class. Then it moves on to M-class, which is, I guess, moderate soil based on the sort of changes in sort of moisture.
Yeah.
So again, an M-class, to give you a sort of idea, again, you think your block is flat, an M-class soil might move up to 40 mil. So which is quite a bit,
Yeah.
So what happens and why the slab has to get stronger the more the movement is because the slab will have to cope with the movement of the ground. So the more the ground is going to move, the stronger the slab has to be. So that's why the soil classifications are really important.
Yeah.
So M-class can move up to, say, 40 mil, and probably 20% of all the jobs we do, and it's M, so it's moderate. It's not too bad. There's nothing wrong about it. Most of the soil we see then is H1. H1 is highly reactive soil. So highly reactive soil obviously means that it moves quite a bit. So we need to make sure that the slab's strong enough to cope with those movements. And I would say H1 would probably represent easily 50-60% of what we do.
I was about to say, it's the most common slab that we do.
And which is why, I guess, when people usually look for a builder, I would try to get the pricing straight away of them. All right, how much is the slab if it comes out at H1?
Yeah.
No point in really getting a quote based on S-class soil, because it's just not going to happen. Like the chances are so small that when I speak to a builder, I would say right away, okay, I understand you've quoted an S-class soil, but how much would it be to upgrade to an H1? At least you get the answer, and you know how much you're up to if you have that H1 slab. That's exactly right. That builder can't tell you, I don't know, I have to wait for a soil test. They have pricing on an H1 slab. An H1 slab is designed, they all have the same design, I guess, except from the appearing.
Yeah.
So they can't really tell you, we have to wait for the engineer design, because it's not true. They're just trying to hide, I guess, the cost from you. Then it goes on to H2 soil. So H2 soil is extremely highly reactive soil. So just another step from, I guess, H1. We see it a bit, but I would say probably like the S-class, maybe 10-15% tops, I would say. Yeah. Again, it's not too bad, but you just got to make sure that obviously with a slab, I guess, and I'm going to get a little bit more into your detail, so I hope I'm not going to confuse people too much, but think about it. If the water affects and the moisture is going to affect your slab, the key thing is for the water to not pond around your house. Yeah. So the worse your soil classification is, the more you have to be careful about the water that is around your house, because that's what's going to affect your soil. So again, think about it. You've got your slab. It rains. So what's going to happen? The soil is going to expand. And then when it's sunny, what's going to happen is the soil is going to contract.
Yeah.
So the least moisture change you can have around your slab, the better your slab is going to be. And it's also important the higher the class of the soil is. So H2. After that, we have E-class soil, which they are quite common nowadays in sort of areas like Newport, Logan. We do see quite a lot. So E-class soil is, like the E says, extremely reactive soil.
Yeah.
Extremely reactive soil means that your soil can actually move more than 75 mil.
Wow, isn't that much?
75 mil. So
Shit.
75 mil is no small amount of sort of movement. So
It's true. Yeah.
for example, the front of your house, I guess, is here. The back of your house could actually go up 75 mil.
That's crazy.
More than 75 mil. So yeah, think about that too when you are going to buy a block and it comes at E-class. You really have to think about it because you can't change it.
Yeah.
No matter what you do, that soil is E-class. And yes, you can control the moisture around that house, but the E-class soil will always remain, I guess. So,
So, like, what's sort of that typical like E-class soil? Is it a bit more of like a looser soil as opposed to there's not much rock there?
no,
Like, what is it?
not necessarily. It's just the moisture change in that soil. So what happens is when they taste that soil and they get what's called Y sort of values, and that value is going to tell you how much movement that soil is meant to be having.
Yeah.
For example, they test it, they get the Y values, and they realize that it's going to be above, say, 8 centimeters or sort of 80 mils. So the slab's going to have to be an E-class, and the slab has to be designed to cope with that movement.
Yeah.
And that's where the extra cost comes in. The extra cost doesn't come just because it's an E-class. The extra comes because an E-class will have usually 16 mil bars as opposed to 12 mil bars. And say when a normal M-class slab might be 310 as an overall depth, a E-class is going to be nearly half a meter thick.
Wow.
Nearly half a meter thick. So
It's crazy. Just in slab.
that's why. So you get thicker beams, you get thicker concrete, you get stronger bars as reinforcement, and that's just so that when the soil is going to move, I guess whether it moves through the center of the slab or through the side of the slab, you don't want that slab to crack. Slab will crack.
Yeah.
Slabs will crack, but the aim is to remain within tolerances, I guess.
Yeah.
So after E-class comes the P. P obviously stands for a problem. Doesn't necessarily have to be a problem. So don't stress out too much if you see a P-class soil.
Yeah.
Because it could be a P-class soil that is then reclassified as an M-class because it just needs a few concrete piers, I guess. So it doesn't have to be that bad. Yes, it can get really bad, but it doesn't have to be that bad. Why do they classify it as P-class? There's a few reasons, but the main one is the fill on that block.
Yeah.
Most land developers nowadays, when they develop new land, they're going to add fill, they're going to remove fill, and that's obviously to get streets looking nice, to get really nice looking blocks, because obviously you can't just leave the hills the way they are. You got to build roads, you got to build retaining. So
For sure.
a P-class will come when that fill is not compacted to standard.
Yeah.
So again, and we've done stories on Instagram. For those that are not following us, follow us on Instagram because it's quite good.
Post a lot of good content.
We post a lot of good content like this.
That's it.
Imagine that we put soil on that table. If that new soil is not compacted, obviously things, if you push hard, your hand will go through to a certain point. That's why a slab will be classified as P, because that field is not compacted.
For sure.
So usually what happens is you buy a new block of land in an estate. They will give you what's called a disclosure plan most of the time. And the first thing to see is, does the developer have a level 1 compaction certificate? What that level 1 compaction certificate does is it certifies that soil is compacted to a standard, and they give you a certificate to say so that you need to forward to your engineer.
Love it.
Now, some people don't realize this again, but a lot of the land nowadays might be filled 1 meter, 2 meter, 3 meter, 4 meters. So, your house is literally sitting on fill. So you really want to make sure you have what's called a level 1 compaction certificate. So when you are buying a block of land, make sure you ask your developer for that level 1 compaction certificate, and make sure you pass that on to your builder.
Awesome. So I think we've got a pretty good understanding now of all the different classifications and how they all work. But the other thing you briefly mentioned was about piering.
Yeah, that's it.
Did you want to just quickly touch on the different types of piering and why you may require piering? How the cost comes into this.
So in terms of piering, and that's again where a lot of builders are going to try to screw people over because people have no idea. You're going to need $10,000 of piering. How, where, how much is piering? No idea. So it's really easy for builders to try to load this sort of piering up.
That's it. And often because like they're the authority and they're telling because they know what they're talking about,
you're
just going to usually pay it because you're like, oh, okay, it's 10 grand. The builder's telling me I need it. Shit, I better pay it.
That's exactly right. Yeah. So piering works in different ways. And when you build a slab, the one thing you want to make sure is obviously that the slab is sitting on hard ground.
Yeah.
Usually you want a slab to sit on natural ground. So what happens is, for example, your block has a little bit of fall. And again, most people think that block might be flat even if it's got a bit of fall. So always get a survey so that you know how much fall is on that block.
Yeah.
But usually, your block might have a meter of fall. What happens is a builder is going to do what's called a cut and fill. So your block has a bit of fall. We go halfway, we fill the section that's on the lower side, and we cut the section that's on the higher side.
Yeah.
So that brings us back to retaining, but that's another story. And we'll see if we got time to talk about this because it's quite involved. So if you can imagine that the cut side would usually sit on natural ground because obviously you've cut that land.
Yeah.
But a fill side is soil that you've added, and like we were talking about, you have not compacted to standard. You might have done what's called a control fill, but you don't have a level 1 compaction certificate on that fill. And I said unto all sort of builders, no builder is going to really fill half a meter and give you a level 1 because it's going to be too expensive. So if you can imagine that half of your slab, for example, in that case, is going to be sitting on half a meter of fill. If you don't pier that slab, what's going to happen is your slab that's sitting here is going to start tilting and tilting and tilting and tilting. So obviously your slab's going to break. Goodbye to your house. And so that's the reason why you really want piering. So if you have half a meter of fill, usually the piering would go another 0.2 or 0.3 meters deep. So you might be looking at 0.8 meters of concrete piers on that fill side. But that's really why piering is important. So that your house is sitting on natural ground, and no matter what happens, the house cannot tilt, I guess.
That's it.
Long story short. In terms, and that's what's so hard about soil test. That's why I don't want that podcast to run for too long, but there's a lot of information. Where do you start? Where do you stop? There's a lot of information. So I'll try hard to cover everything, but not too much sort of detail. If you do want more information, obviously, tell us because we can go in even more detail so that
it's true. Chris can get really
get into even more detail. So,
and he gets real nerdy on it. So
another very important thing to think about, and that might be why you get a P-class soil and why you might need piering. And people are going to think, why do I even need piering? It's natural ground. There's nothing wrong with it. But have you got trees next to your house? And that happens a lot in acreage or there's bush at the back, or you've got a massive tree at the front of the house. So remember how we talked about moisture and the ground? What's going to happen is you've got your block, there's a massive tree at the front. The tree is really going to suck moisture from the ground, dry up that side, and the other side is not going to get the same consistency in moisture. Which is why, again, think about it, that ground is going to get shrunk quicker. So the slab is going to want to crack towards the front section. So that's why sometimes you might have natural ground and you might have everything, but you need to pier where you have trees to the proximity of your house. So usually you buy a sort of acreage block. There might be a few trees. Always a really good idea to try to get rid of them. At least, for a good 10 meters where the house is. Because you just do not want to have trees next to your house. And if you are building a house, obviously, and you are doing your own landscaping, do not plant massive trees next to your house because it's not good and it's not recommended for the slab. So that's also why the slab could come as a P class and why you would need piering. And again, it's very hard because as a client, you might get your soil test and the builder said, "Oh, there's a tree at the front, and we're going to need to pier the slab." And you're going to be like, "Really? Like, is this a joke? You're going to charge me $5,000 to pier the front of my house? Like, what?"
Yeah.
So that's why it's important to know all this, because you will be able to understand the costings and where it comes from a lot better.
Love it.
And in terms of piering, again, going into a little bit more of detail, there's a few more things you can do. So you have concrete piering, which is, again, for those that don't know, and I'm going to assume they don't, is you drill a hole into the ground and you fill it with concrete. It's that simple. So the aim is to get that hole to hard ground again, so that concrete pier is sitting onto hard ground and the house obviously does not move.
Yeah.
When, for example, we get a house that's got a lot of piers, and I think yours is one of those, if I remember well.
Yeah, it's got quite a bit of piering. I know one of the main issues as well was that because we're building zero lot alignment to the left, that because we were on tiered blocks, it was putting a lot of pressure on the neighbor's sort of like retaining wall.
So yeah, that's
then we put the pier in there to then take the pressure off the wall and put it on the pier.
That's exactly right.
And that way it won't affect that. So that's something to keep in mind as well if you're doing like zero boundary or to the boundary.
And if you got pools, same principle. So if you got pools, and also if you have a lot of piering, sometimes it's very cost efficient to go screw piers. Screw piers, so we've talked about, you drill a hole, you pour concrete, that's a concrete pier.
Yep.
A screw pier is more so really just a picture of screw, but a really big one that you just screw onto the ground until it reaches a certain strength. And then your slab sits on top of that. So screw piers are quite good, because if you have to go to say 3 or 4 meter deep, concrete piers are going to start to get a little bit hard.
Yeah.
And so screw piers are a really good solution when there's a lot of fill. So yeah.
Cool.
I'm telling you, this is good deep.
That was fucking intense, man. Just taking it all in. Okay, so we've talked a lot about the different classifications and different things that are required and that you can have. Yeah. If your brain is not fried at this point, like, holy shit.
That's what I said. It can go really, really deep. But at the same time, I know it might be boring,
but it's going to help you so much if you can really grasp it and understand this when you're building a house. Yeah.
Because you might not realize, but this can cost you thousands. And if you don't understand it, it's going to be hard to justify where that money is coming from.
And people will take advantage, builders will take advantage of
100%.
it. So it's important, that you do know. But so we've talked about classifications. I can't even speak now. My mind's like still like trying to comprehend everything.
I feel like we've been actually a PhD class.
Yeah, it's bad. All right, so classifications. We've talked about the moisture in the soil, everything like that. We've talked about the concrete piering. We've talked about screw piers. Now we've talked a little bit about the slope as well and retaining walls. So let's talk about the different kinds of slabs. So I'll let you take it away. But talk us through all the different kinds of slabs we can have.
That's it. So the two main slabs, and there's obviously a lot of types, but the two main ones are waffle pods and a traditional slab. So I would say I've never seen a project builder that doesn't do a waffle pod slab, and even small builders would usually tend to do a waffle pod slab. So that would be really what we see easily 97% of the time.
So what is a waffle pod slab, and what's the difference, and why? What are these two most common ones?
That's it. So I guess trying to put it into perspective, and a waffle pod slab, I guess, is the new version, and a traditional, like the name says, is more the old school ways of doing a slab like they used to do it.
Yeah.
So the first thing to set up is people ask, okay, what is better? Is a waffle pod or a traditional slab? Long story short, if you have them side by side, a traditional will be a little bit better.
Yeah.
The reason for that is a traditional slab has a footing that goes all around the slab. So that's usually why this is much better.
Yeah.
Because it has a full footing that usually goes either 450 or 600 deep.
Yeah.
And makes the slab obviously much, much, much stronger.
Yeah.
Now, there's nothing wrong about a waffle pod slab, in my opinion, I guess. A waffle pod slab, and that's where people get confused. They see, the polystyrene squares, and I'm like, is my house sitting on polystyrene? Like, it's gotta be a joke.
Yeah.
But the polystyrene could could be foam.
Yeah.
We could make it of cardboard. We could make it of plastic. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
The polystyrene is just here to create a void.
That's it. Yeah.
So a waffle pod slab is just, I guess, a slab that has, instead of a traditional slab would say have beams every 3 meters,
Yep.
a waffle pod slab has a smaller beam, but every 1 meter.
Yeah.
And that's where the void comes in. The void comes in so that you just don't pour, a layer of 0.3 of a meter of concrete,
Yeah.
but you have void so that you can spend less money, but still have the strength that the slab needs to cope with that sort of movement. So that's the only thing that those voids are there for.
Yeah.
And on a traditional slab, the voids are still there, but they're usually made of sand.
Yeah.
Because the voids are much sort of bigger, the guys just do it with sand because it's much easier. But the concept is the same. You create voids, you have a slab that sits on top, and you have beams every 1 or 3 meter if it's a traditional slab. So
Awesome.
in terms of slab, there's nothing wrong with a waffle pod. The critical thing with those two slabs is to make sure that, like we talked about, natural ground.
Yeah.
You could have, you might think, oh, yes, I'm going to have a traditional slab. But if you have 3 meters of fill
Yeah.
and you sit that slab on top, that slab is going to sink no matter what, whether
Yeah.
it's a waffle pod, whether it's a traditional. If it's not screw piered or concrete piered to 3 meters deep, it will sink.
Yeah.
So we've literally done now nearly 1,000 slab, and they probably have been, I would say 997 have been as a waffle pods.
Yeah.
My own house is a waffle pod slab, and it's just a much more efficient way to sort of do it.
Yep.
And if well engineered and well maintained, there's nothing wrong with it. So yeah.
Cool. All right. So we've given people a little bit of an insight and an explanation to all of these things. Now let's tell them the price of these things.
Yeah. So that's where it can get really complicated, and builders usually, will charge and will come up with a random explanation as to why they've charged that much, I guess. So you will find that most builders, even on an H1 or an H2 slab with a few piers, you might get hit with like 20K. For a normal house. Yeah, it goes really quick, and by the time you had retaining walls and this and that, like literally you will be surprised.
Yeah, it builds up.
It builds up really, really quick. So, I mean, to give you a sort of idea, a lot of builders nowadays have an H1 slab as a standard. So again, if that's something your builder is not offering, I would ask them, what would be the price to upgrade to an H1 soil if the soil comes out as that?
Yep. So let's use that. Let's take H1 and what is, in your opinion, ridiculous to pay for?
Oh wow! I've seen builders gone from S class to H1 for like $10,000. To me, it's absolutely it's just completely so ridiculous. I would never pay it.
Yeah.
And I don't know how people pay it, but obviously they paid the deposit and they're like, oh,
that's it.
It sounds about right. I need to upgrade my slab. So
All the builder says so.
Well, that's it. I've seen H1 at 10K plus, and that's not even including piering.
Wow.
Yeah.
Far out. Okay, and what would you sort of deem an acceptable sort of amount to be paying?
Or to go from an
Just a
S
rough,
class, so say if a builder has an S class soil as a standard and I want to upgrade you to an H1, I would probably maybe go 3,500 would probably be about right, I would say.
Cool.
Yeah. I haven't done these sort of calculations, but based on the slabs and the differences in steel, I would say, this is about right. Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Well, I think that's given a really good summary and an insight into what exactly site costs are, and hopefully people were able to comprehend and grasp that complex understanding and delivery that Chris gave.
I hope it all made sense.
Yeah, but at the same time, it's gonna. Hopefully, that was incredible value. Like, there's not a lot of people that are out here explaining to you this sort of stuff in the depth that we just did, and giving you even the pricing and stuff as well. So before we leave this episode and wrap it up, is there anything else you think of that we can include that people should know?
I guess the main thing, again, from a home buyer's point of view is don't just look at a price and think, it's okay. It looks great, sign up and, get a soil test and then screw it over.
Compare prices, guys.
Compare prices and ask, so if you are dealing with one of the project builders, I can't remember where he said that, if it was one of our CMA TVs or if it was something, I can't remember, but ask them if speak to your neighbors.
Yeah.
they will tell you, oh, my builder came back with an H1 sole, or my builder came back with an H2 sole. Usually sole is similar in the area, not the same though.
Yeah.
A lot of time you might have the a house next door and yours might be an H1 and the house next door might be an H2.
Yeah.
So always be mindful of that. What your neighbor has is not necessarily what you have.
Yeah.
But have a chat with your neighbors. Have a chat with the land developers. Most of those land developers like Stockland and all these sort of major one are quite honest and transparent. So they will tell you. And so once you get that information, go back to your builder and say, okay, I've heard that the estate usually has H1 or H2 soil.
Yep.
How much would it be? And could you include that in a quote so that you can actually make a decision and compare sort of apples with apples or two apples? I don't even know which one it is.
Yeah.
But so that's probably the main thing I would say. Make sure you do a little bit of sort of research and don't just pay a deposit because the price was good and they've quoted on an S-class and you really have no idea what it is. The second thing is, no matter what builder you pick, once you get your soil test, ask the builder for that soil test.
Yeah.
Don't just rely on it's going to be $20,000 in site cost as per the soil test.
Yeah.
I would always request a copy of that soil test.
Yeah. Have a keys.
That's it. Watch that video maybe a few times so that then you can go through your soil test and actually try to understand it.
That's it.
But usually, that's the good thing about it. Most engineers have a little bit of detail on their soil test.
Yeah.
Now, again, it's a little bit hard to understand, but hopefully after that video, people will get a bit of a better idea.
They'll understand the terminology, the numbers, the
That's
meanings.
exactly right. But have a look.
Sweet.
That's it. Have a look at the soil test. And, prime one, what we just said, it could be classified as P, and your builder is going to say, oh, it's P class, it's another $20,000. It doesn't have to be because
100%.
the soil test might actually say it's P class, but we've reclassified it as M class, and you can actually have an M class soil with minimal peering to the front.
Yeah.
So then if your builder is starting to charge 20K, well, hold on, where's that cost coming from? So you should really have a look at the soil test and just understand it.
That's it.
Whether it's the classification, whether it's the peering required, and how the peering is. Well, first of all, based on the slope of your land, which is not going to show on the soil test, but it's going to show on the contour survey. So not everything is on the soil test, and sometimes you might say there's no peering required, but there might be because of the slope of your land that the engineer might not have taken into consideration. So they do take that into consideration at the slab design stage, but when they did the soil test, they might not have the survey plan yet that shows exactly what the slope is. So long story short, have a look at your slab classification and have a look.
That was long story long, bro.
Goodness. I just want to be specific because I know how hard it is.
It's good.
Yeah, I really know how hard it is to understand. And even for me to try to explain it, you see, I don't know how long that video was, but it's probably 40 minutes just on explaining soil test.
Yeah.
So that's how much. So imagine, I would bet that 99% of people that have bought a home have no idea what the soil test was and how much they paid for.
That's true.
And what it covered.
You are guaranteed to learn at least one thing in this entire
and if we can
podcast,
save you money,
sure.
hopefully thousands, that's a whole purpose.
That's the goal, right?
That's a whole purpose.
Yeah.
So the next thing to look into the soil test is the depth of the fill.
Yeah.
And again, for example, we're going to take just a really quick example where a builder could screw you over. Yeah. They haven't sent the level 1 compaction to the engineer, and the soil report shows a meter of fill. So the builder is going to charge you for peering to the whole house while it's not really required.
Yeah.
So have a look at that. It doesn't mean, and again, we can go further with that, but I'm going to stop. But
doesn't mean you don't, but
it doesn't mean. So a level 1 compaction certificate also does not mean no peering.
Yeah.
You might still need it, particularly if half of the block's been filled and half of the block hasn't. So again, we can go literally so deep in this that we can spend a few hours just talking about that topic. So, but this is just a really...
I feel like they get the gist.
Yeah, it's not a quick rundown, but it's just a rundown to just make sure, you look into it, you read that report, again, watch that video a few times, and just try to understand where that cost is coming from, and feel free to ask your builder.
Yeah.
If the builder is transparent, he will say,
they should have no issues trying to tell you.
That's exactly right. This is where the cost come from.
Yeah.
The soil test is H2, so that's what we need to do with the slab. And obviously, there's concrete peering because there's a meter of fall on your block.
Yeah.
So, there's no reason why the builder can't really explain to you where that sole pricing comes from. Hopefully, what we said is going to help people. And because I know that a lot of those builders are making so much money that I actually feel bad for those people. I wish they knew a little bit more about those soles so that they could save easily maybe $5,000-$10,000, maybe even more.
That's it. Yeah, that's it. And this is happening like every day.
Every day. And that's one of the reasons why
they get away with it. Yeah.
That's exactly right. But they get away with it to a certain point because a lot of the project builders have really big fall rates in their contract. And that's usually because we've talked about that last week. The color selection is one thing. Yes. And again, if you haven't watched, go back and watch this. But the sole report is another reason where, they're all excited. They've paid a deposit. They get a sole test and they get the bill and they're like, oh shit, I should have gone with another builder.
Yeah.
So, and that's why a lot of those builders usually would just lose quite a lot of soft clients based on not just the color selection upgrades, but also the sole test.
Cool. I think we covered it pretty well.
A bit of knowledge for you there.
Just a bit of a brain dump there for you.
If you have any question, obviously, I know it's complicated. So if you have any question, drop a comment below. Send us a message on Instagram. We're always more than happy to help out and more than happy to just try to explain some of those things because it can be very complicated.
That's it.
And the truth is, a lot of builders do not even know what I've just talked about.
That's the other thing
and
too.
that's the start part.
It's external companies that they've hired to do this sort of shit.
Exactly right. Exactly right. So they don't even know. They have a process that say, if the sole is H2, I got to upgrade due to that cost. But they don't even know what it means. They don't even know what is talked about.
They're like, can you break that? You'll be like, can you break that down for me? And they'll be like, oh, hold on, I just gotta go back and
Sorry, I can't break it down.
Meanwhile, they're googling.
That's it. H2 sole, what does it mean?
No. They're gonna watch the CMA podcast.
Oh, that's it. Exactly. Good point. Yeah. Well, it's a good point. I bet you how many people are gonna watch that podcast that work for the builders because it's gonna be really good learning.
That's true. So, cool. So I think, we've covered that really well. Hopefully that's given people a bit more of an insight into this. If you have any other topics or anything that you would like us to cover, please comment, DM us, whatever the topics. We'd love to know because we'd love to cover them. Because at the end of the day, we sort of do this to help you guys out and be as transparent as possible with you guys. So we hope you enjoyed this. We hope you learned something. Give us your feedback down below. And we will see you next week with another amazing episode of Nailed It. So thank you very much.
Thank you. We hope we made building a little bit easier.
That's it.
A little bit.
All right, let's go. I need a beer. That was intense.